introspection. Like I stated in the dua of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam about looking in the mirror and then looking within. Right? That when you look in the mirror, don't just look at the exterior, look within. So that lack of introspection, lack of muhasabah is a part of an impediment to this unity. One might think that that's an isolated incident. Why am I mentioning this as it relates to the jama'ah? A believer is only al-mu'min al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if. That the strong believer in all facets of life, whether it's intellectual, spiritual, in ibadah, in the strong believer in all facets of life is better than the weak believer. And the greater you can be of an asset to the ummah is dependent upon how good you can be from within. Right? How good can you be from within? That's how much you can benefit exterior. They say in Arabic, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِيهِ. Someone who doesn't have it can't give it. Right? And so if a person doesn't have khayr within them, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. If people do not have khayr within them, then they can't give it. And so it is of the utmost importance to have this introspection. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were an example of this. The islah of the Sahaba is an islah that is heart-piercing. That when you think about the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and how they had self-introspection within them, you will change your life. You will change your life. Hanzala radiallahu anhu is an example of this. Hanzala radiallahu anhu was once with his family, and it just dawned upon him that I'm not the same person I am at home as I am when I am in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm just not the same person. And so with this, he had this introspection that Nafiq Hanzala. Hanzala is a munafiq. Hanzala is a hypocrite. If he's not the same person that he is with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he is at home. Nafiq Hanzala. And with this, he went out of his house just in angst, in pain. He went out. And on the way, he met Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And he told Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu this. He said, this is something that's bothering me. That when I am with Rasulullah, I am like this. When I am at home, I am like this. It's night and day difference. And so Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, I'm the same way. They both come to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And they're saying, Nafiqa Hanzala. Hanzala is a munafiq. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is a person of immense intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, intellectual intelligence, and he first calms them down. He says, what is it? And so they tell them, they say to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that when we are with you, كَأَنَّا رَأْيَ عَيْنٍ. It's as if we see Jannah and Jahannam right before us. And then when we go back home, playing with the kids, interacting with the wife, all of these things, we forget everything. And so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam told them that you're not going to be on cloud 9 all the time. You're not صَافَحَتْكُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. If that was the case, the angels will greet you. So sa'atan wa sa'a. There's a time for this, there's a time for that. There's a time for this, and there's a time for that. And so why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this, look at the introspection of a Sahabi. How great can he be for the ummah is dependent upon how great can he be by himself. By himself first. Right? And that's the khidmah that he can give outwardly. And so this is not an isolated example. Umar radiallahu anhu has heard from the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam about his palace in Jannah. He has heard it. He has heard from the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, qasruhu fil Jannah, his palace in Jannah. Later on, later on after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam leaves this world, there's a Sahabi by the name of Huzaifa. He was known as Sahib Sir. He was the secret holder of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam confided to him certain secrets, and so he was known as Sahib Sir. One of the things that he knew was he knew the names of certain hypocrites in Medina. And so Umar radiallahu anhu has heard from the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam his description of his palace in Jannah. And so he asks Huzaifa, Ana minhum? Am I from them? Am I from the hypocrites that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told you about? Look at this introspection, this islah of a Sahabi. And so what does that tell you? That tells you as a Muslim, look at the khidmah that Umar radiallahu anh gave to this ummah. How was he able to give that khidmah? Qu anfusakum. Save yourself first. When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam mentions in the etiquettes of dua that when you are making dua, فَلْيَبْدَأْ بِنَفْسِ. Start with yourself. One might think, oh, I'm gonna kind of fall on the sword. I'm gonna make dua for others first. No. فَلْيَبْدَأْ بِنَفْسِ. Start with yourself. You know, when a person is in the airplane and they talk about putting the mask on, if something happens, they say put your mask on first before you put your child's mask on. Similarly, you got to save yourself first. You have to attain najat and salvation first for yourself before you can be of any khidmah, any asset, any service to others. And so, qu anfusakum, which brings me to my second point. Qu anfusakum wa ahlikum. Then start with your family. And this, this is why you cannot sidestep the priorities in terms of how a person is. A person has to be aware of the situation that they are in. As Muslims, we are living here in a non-Muslim land. We understand that, right? As Muslims, we are a minority here in non-Muslim lands. Granted, alhamdulillah, because of the Chicagoland community having a stronger presence, there is generational Muslims. Some people are in their second, third generation here as Muslims. But at the end of the day, we are living as Muslims in a non-Muslim land. In that non-Muslim land, because of their dominance and control, there are certain elements that phase into a Muslim's life that you have to be aware of. In terms of education, every public school's education has a Eurocentric mindset, has an Euro-American pedagogy that you must be aware of. No matter how much you try and sprinkle Islam over it, it's still a Eurocentric curriculum. It's still an American pedagogy. And so there are things with that may be beneficial for us and may coincide with us. But then there are things that are completely from the platform of shak and doubt. Right? When the Quran comes to us from the platform of yaqeen, kitab la rayba fi. There is no suspicion, there's no doubt in terms of the Quran. So it's important to be aware of this, to be aware of the situation that you're in and how it can impact others. And so as Muslims, we start with knowing the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, because their example has been described to us, an example that you cannot circumvent. فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا. That if you believe as they believe, meaning if we as Muslims believe as the Sahaba believed, فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا, then you have hidayah. The hidayah of the guidance that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum acquired through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is a guidance that should be our goal. We cannot circumvent the Sahaba radiallahu anhum in thinking that we can attain a level of Islam and piety and righteousness that is going to be above them. They are the exemplar. They are the blueprint. They were selected by Allah Ta'ala to be with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So you recognize this example, and through them, through the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, we will reach levels of hidayah that is going to be impactful. Is going to be impactful. And so recognizing the situation that we are in, it's also important for us, and this is kind of the third point that I'm getting to after focusing on oneself, focusing on one's family, and then knowing that you are in a situation that impacts others. Right? You are in a situation, a unique situation in which you as a Muslim are going to impact others through your af'al, just being Muslim. Just being Muslim, you are going to impact others. Because a person's vantage point on Islam may be only through you. Your neighbors may know nothing about Islam, may have their only real encounter with Muslims may be with you. Your co-workers your classmates may have no interaction with Islam at a human institution level. Yeah, they may interact on it through social media, they may interact with it through TV sources, etc. However, the human institution cannot be replaced. The human institution is the one that is the most impactful. And so you as a Muslim have an added layer of responsibility when it comes to unity. And that is what you do represents others. Many of us may be from the subcontinent, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. How do you think Islam came there? Islam came there through tijara, through trade. Some of the Sahaba and Tabi'in, they went to the coastal area and they engaged in trade. And so if they were of the mindset that, I'm just going to be here and I'm going to get mine, they could have done that. And so why did people become Muslim? They saw their ethics, they saw their moral, they saw how they interacted. And so how they interacted was of the utmost character. And that changed people. That changed people. In the Battle of Badr, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the Muslims are outnumbered 3-1. They're outnumbered. Huzayfa radiallahu anh, the same Sahabi that I was speaking about earlier, he is on his way to join the ranks of the believers. He's on his way to join them. Waqa asiran. The mushrikeen of Mecca capture him. And they say to him that they take a covenant from him that we'll let you go as long as you don't participate with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions in battle against us. We'll let you go. And so Huzaifa, because he's compelled to, right? He does not want to, he's compelled to, gives them the oath. And he gives them his word that he won't participate in battle. Huzaifa radiallahu anh comes to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he says he wants to join the Muslims. He wants to join the Muslims and partake in this battle. In retrospect, we know the importance of the Battle of Badr. It's a huge, immense battle. The first battle that is known, and there's so much attention given to that battle. But Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam does not let him. He does not let him participate in this battle. This is a critical point, right? This is a critical point. Because what happens afterwards, after the Muslims win this battle and they take captives, Muslims are not people who go back on their word. Muslims are not people who are of this low class of ethics that just looking for the quick buck, quick victory. No, Muslims are people of ethics and morals. Muslims are people of high standard. And so when Huzaifa gave him the word that he will not participate, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't allow him to participate. If you study the biography of Huzaifa radiallahu anh, he participated in all of the other ghazawat with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in all of the other battles, but he wasn't able to participate in this one. After the Battle of Badr is over, through treacherous acts, Khubayb radiallahu anh is captured by the enemies, and he's brought as a captive to Mecca, and he's sold to Haris, whose father was killed in the Battle of Badr. And so he prepares a whole scene of how to take vengeance against this one person. He creates this whole scene that he's going to make a scene of him being executed. So Khubayb was in the house of one of the of his captives, and he had made certain requests. One of the requests that he made was if he could borrow a razor to take care of certain necessities. And so while he is a captive in the house, a young child stumbles into his area. And as the practice of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was, when children come, he interacts with them. He puts them on their lap and he plays with them. And so a female relative of this child sees this. He sees that the child is in the possession of Khubayb. Now Khubayb has a right. He has a legitimate right to take this child as a hostage. They took him as a hostage through betrayal, through khiyana. They took him as a hostage. And so Khubayb has a legitimate right to take this child as a hostage to free himself. And so Khubayb looks at the face of that woman, the relative of this child. He sees that the color of her face changes, and he says to her, "I am not like you. I am not like you. We are not cut from the same cloth. I have drank from the suhbah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam." The companionship of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam changed these individuals in a way we could only fathom and imagine. And so he lets the child go. Later on, he is killed, radiyallahu anhu wa radu an. Right? Radiyallahu anhu. He is an example of this, of these ethics and these morals. Huzaifa radiallahu anhu himself is an example of that. At the beginning of the Battle of Badr, after the Battle of Badr, Khubayb radiallahu anhu is an example of that. Later on, we see example after example of how Muslims were. Because of Khubayb radiallahu anhu's death, those that witnessed it, many of them became Muslim. Many of them became Muslim, and they speak about it. They speak about that time. And so the example of Muslims and story of Khaybar, inshallah, if I have time, I might come back to that one. But the concluding point I want to make as we wrap up here and open for questions, as CD has stated, is the way to unity. It comes from working on yourself first and foremost, that there are priorities, that you as an individual must grow in your relationship with Allah Ta'ala. Recognize who Allah Ta'ala is. Be a person who takes care of what's inside the house, figuratively and literally. Takes care of something that is inside the house, inside themselves. And the examples of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum that we have mentioned is telling. Use those as a spark to change your life. Use the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and their stories as a spark to change your life. And the second point that I want to make is, we are Muslims at the end of the day. How we view unity is much different than how anyone else views unity. The non-Muslim has a perspective on unity. The non-Muslim has a perspective on politics. The non-Muslim has a perspective on certain things. But you are a Muslim. What different? You may share certain values, but what makes you different from them? What makes you different from them? If you are Muslim, what makes you different from them? If they're going to get a job and get a good house, get a well-paying job, attains financial success, academic excellence. What makes you different? One of the ways that makes Muslims different is that we understand the rules of the dunya by using the blueprint of the akhirah. The akhirah is part of our worldview. That once we understand the akhirah, the world starts to make sense. This world that we live in starts to make sense once we understand the akhirah. And so when we read the description of the akhirah in the Quran, in the Sunnah, in other through these types of interactions, we see people change from within. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam speaks about qiyamah. And he says there are certain individuals that will be under the throne, under the shade in qiyamah. Usually people qiyamah is intense. People are sweating. Some people are up to their ankles in sweat. Some people are up to their knees. Some people are engulfed. But there will be people who will be under the shade. One of those groups of people is رَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّا فِي اللَّهِ اجْتَمَعَ عَلَيْهِ وَتَفَرَّقَ عَلَيْهِ. Individuals who care for one another, who love one another. اجْتَمَعَ عَلَيْهِ وَتَفَرَّقَ عَلَيْهِ. They come together, joined together, and they dispersed with the level of unity within. Right? They join together for Allah Ta'ala's sake, and they disperse for Allah Ta'ala's sake. This group of individuals will be under a shade. And so that's the prism from which we view qiyamah. That we want to be amongst those individuals, that we understand the akhirah. And because of that, our life in this world changes. And so inshallah with that, I'll open the floor for questions. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. تفضل.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I have a question. You talk about unity and looking into introspection. So you talk in some small group. How about the entire world who is going in a different path and everything? So how does that affect our Muslim Ummah in a whole way?
So if I understand the question correctly, speaking of Muslim unity and introspection is a priority, how about some of the more obvious aspects that we see outside, whether it be at the political level, at the national level, correct? Okay.
Like, does the entire world on the same page? Because if one section is preach about unity and they understand the unity, they interact with the introspection and everything. How about the entire world who is not aware of this fact, who is not knowledgeable about this fact? How is, because everything is affected by everybody else, you know. If one section is understand everything and act upon your guidance and your preaching, that you have to look into the introspection before unity can be achieved. How about the entire world? You know, there are people in the world who are knowledgeable at all, not knowledgeable at all, and they are on a different page at all. They have different knowledge base and everything. So how is that's affecting the entire ummah completely, because not everybody has the same page.
Mm-hmm. So if people are not on the same page, that's going to be a reality that we're going to have to face. Right? It's true. People there may be a level of unity that we fathom and we imagine and that we hope for that might not achieve. We may not achieve. And we may have times in which, okay, there were times during certain levels of Muslim empires that there was a level of unity that we could see. However, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Allah Ta'ala changes and fluctuates situations. Situations will always change. Sometimes Muslims will have a unity that is at the global level. Sometimes Muslims will have to focus on certain priorities. And so the process of unity as a function, as a goal, is fraught and void of any benefit unless it leads us closer to Allah Ta'ala. If we have this apparent view of unity, that people are joined together in whatever aspects, but they're distant from Allah Ta'ala, that's not a type of unity we want. And so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam gives us a prescription in terms of how do you get qurbah? What is the fastest and quickest way to draw closer to Allah Ta'ala? It is through fara'id. It is through acts, fara'id, not just in terms of salah, right? Not just in terms of the 5 daily salah, but in terms of what's a priority. What is the priority for an individual? That's how you draw closer to Allah Ta'ala. Then through that, you get to the nawafil. Right? Then you get to acts that are beyond that. But there is a level of what they call fiqhul awlawiyat, the understanding of priorities. And so introspection is of the utmost priority because it leads to our najat. Our najat. What type of unity is it that we can say that the ummah is united, but in that unity we do not get Jannah? Waliyadhu billah. And so Allah Ta'ala give us that unity that if we see it in this world, alhamdulillah, but we may not. And we have that is a pill that we must be willing to swallow. Right? That is a pill that we must be willing to swallow, because that type of unity that we are hoping for, that type of unity that is going to last forever, khayrun wa abqa, is in the next life. Oh, yeah. You're welcome. تفضل.
What is the best way, or what is like the one way, like the best way to understand akhirah, you would say?
MashaAllah, it's a good question in terms of what is the best way to understand the akhirah. You know, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was asked this question, not this particular question, but he was asked this question, ayyul a'mali afdal? Which action is the best? And for different times and for different situations, he gave different responses. So, for some individuals, he stated to them, La taghdab. Control your anger. Do not get angry. For some individuals, it was something else. Right? And for others, it was something else. So what we get from this body of literature, in which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is asked this question, and he responds in different ways, is that we are bound by time and space. Right now, what is the best thing that we could do? Start preparing for Isha Salah. There are priorities, right? But we are bound by the masjid. We are bound by this time that we are in. And so because of that, we are going to make the decision to pray Salah, to pray Isha Salah. And so when a person asks, what's the best description, what is the best way to understand the akhirah? It is through the understanding of the description of the akhirah. There is a Quranic description of Jannah. There is a Quranic description of Jahannam. There's a Quranic description of Al-Yawm Al-Akhir. One of the main focal points of the Quran's message is the world of the unseen. And so the world of the unseen, as I stated, goes beyond human rationale. Where human imagination ends, that's where the description of Jannah begins. And so the description of Jannah is not something that we can come to on our own accordance. We have to seek that through wahi, through revelation that is given us through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and through the Quran. And so at times, you know, if a person has children, they'll understand this example. There are times in which you may concentrate on an aspect within Jannah to get them to do that. Maybe they're preparing for Ramadan. Maybe they just had a fight with their sibling. Maybe they just they just lied, and because of that, you're teaching them certain elements of the description of the last day. And so it will be time bound, and on top of that, it will be place bound. But through that, understand that it is beyond human rationale. It is fawq al-aql. It is beyond human rationale to see Qiyamah. And some of those things we may be able to understand. But as we put ourselves closer to the wavelength of wahi, as we put ourselves closer to the wavelength of revelation, more things will come to start to click. All right, more pieces of understanding will start to make sense. And so it is our duty and our responsibility to come to wahi. I think we have time for maybe one question. See?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I just had a quick question about, I guess, like, when do you think it's a good, like, when is it a good time or a good topic to, I guess, like, actually dispute with someone? Because I feel like with a lot of the work that people do, whether it be in the community or at college or whatever, I feel like there's always people that have something to say, negative or positive, no matter what decision you might make. So like, in what cases is it like necessary for you to kind of just like push through, or in what cases is it like, I guess, permissible for you to like actually dispute with someone?
Disputing with someone is a responsibility that comes with qualifications. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, وَمَا عَلَيْهِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ. He did not have to convince individuals. His job wasn't to convince. His job was to convey. Convincing he did as well, right? He was a great orator. He was a great, he was able to convince individuals in many different ways through his balagha, through his fasaha, through his eloquence and rhetoric. However, disputing is not a goal that we should aspire to. If it happens, it happens. But, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in a hadith that اقرأوا القرآن ما ائتلفت به قلوبكم فإذا اختلفتم فقوموا عنه. That read the Quran as long as your hearts are together. And when you are in dispute, فقوموا عنه, then leave. Stand up and leave. What that means is there are times in which you may be right. You may be right in what you have stated, but يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا. The Quran can be a parable that misguides many. And so it is important, on top of not just being right, knowing what to say, but how to say it. And so Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, when he was in the court of Najashi, and he was about to be sent back to be persecuted in Mecca, what he said, he could have stated, he could have stated many things, but he stated that which brought the hearts together, and was a cause for Najashi to become Muslim. He started reciting ayats from Surah Maryam, and that selection, and the selection of that, the choice of that, is what brought the hearts together. And so, to dispute for the sake of being right, that is a dangerous path. Dispute for the purpose of joining the hearts, even if that means that you must step away at the moment, that is an important responsibility. And so another example of that is Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu's mother. And so if you read the story of how she became Muslim and how Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam told Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu to interact with her, is another example of that. Having dispute is not the end goal. And it wasn't the prophetic model, and it's not the model that we ascribe by. If we are put in a situation, then we must understand that we have to have certain qualifications to be in that position, lest we do a disservice to Islam. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.